Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our Soulcast Media live event. I'm so thrilled that you are all joining in for a very special episode where I'm going to be chatting with my dear friend, Chuck Garcia. Now, he is what I was like behind the scenes, like, how do I introduce you, Chuck? So, Chuck is an author, he's a professor at Columbia University, and really, he is a phenomenal person on all things leadership. Now, before I introduce Chuck to our conversation, I want to do a quick welcome. If this is the first time you are joining, I'm so glad you're here. I host these, every other month or so. And my purpose and my vision for having this is to teach you how to become that better communicator in the workplace. Whether you are just starting out in your career or you've been working for years, I truly believe communications is one of the most important skills. And today's topic, which is about taking your career to new heights, is going to be about that. If this is the first time you and I are meeting, my name is Jessica Chen. I'm the founder and CEO of Soulcast Media, and we are a communications company. Prior to Soulcast Media, my background is in journalism. I was a TV reporter for about 10 years here in the US at ABC, NBC, and just last year, my debut book, Smart, Not Loud, How to Get Noticed at Work for All the Right Reasons, was published, and it has been amazing. It's been amazing seeing the feedback from folks, and it's being translated to all these different languages. So if you haven't gotten the book yet, you haven't read it, it's called Smart, Not Loud. So with that, let's just dive into today's episode. So I'm going to bring in my guest, Chuck Garcia. So I did a quick intro of you, Chuck, but please let folks know who you are and the work that you do.
Well, thank you, Jessica. First, I want to say it's a pleasure collaborating with you. I will collaborate with you on all things anywhere. So thank you for having me. I think by way of introduction, you noted a few things, but I want to state that I am an incredibly blessed individual because I was given a childhood where education mattered, but it wasn't just education about what you could memorize and what you could cram, exam, and regurgitate. But I had parents that helped me learn the importance of communication. So I am an individual that spent the better part of 25 plus years on Wall Street. All I ever wanted to do as a kid was go to Wall Street. And I'm really glad I did, but my Wall Street career took a turn. Although I expected to train as an investment manager, I joined a teeny little company that no one ever heard of in my late 20s called Bloomberg. And I was the 190th employee in a firm whose revenues were $70 million a year. Because I'm bilingual, I was head of Latin American sales for the first 7 years, but this is where it turned, Jessica. I had a knack, even though I never debated in high school, I never acted. There was something about my capacity to communicate that was recognized by my CEO. And for the next 7 years, after my first seven, I spent the time as the company's professional communicator. I traveled all over the world, everywhere, wherever the financial markets were. My job was to step on stage and to be able to communicate the value proposition of Bloomberg. From there, I went to a firm called BlackRock, where I spent several years. So Bloomberg was really the runway to my next step. And then 10 years ago, and this is where I am now, I made up my mind on a mountain, I'm a mountaineer, that I am going to go home and every day I am going to go to work now, no longer for myself, but in the service of others. So I think the best way that I can say, who am I? I am a very blessed individual. What I do is three things. I'm a professional speaker. It's probably a quarter of my time. I am a Columbia professor. That's another quarter of my time. I teach in the Graduate School of Engineering. Let me state to our audience, Jessica is now a part of our faculty. We brought her into my class and how fortunate we were. She hit a home run. And then half of my time, this is really where I spend most of my time, Jessica, I'm what's called an executive coach. Companies, mostly financial institutions, because that's my pedigree, those are the people that know me, they hire me to do one of two things. And in this case, I help people to do something, and half the time I help people to not do something, believe it or not. So for the do something, I'm an executive coach in public speaking. I teach a lot of executives who are promoted on the strength of their technical competence, yet are uncomfortable in the thing that you and I do so well, easily, let's just say, and I help them to be more powerful and compelling communicators. On the other front, I'm a coach for emotional intelligence. And this is where something I learned over the years that I had developed, where I'm helping people to operate and stay calm under the weight of pressure and enormous expectations. because we start these projects on the premise that pressure changes everything. And when we think about our formal education, it didn't promote the capacity to be able to handle the pressure. It just focused on getting an A. Yet, when people get into their careers and they find that most of their career is improving something in a meeting or in preparation, my job on two sides, whether it's helping them to be better communicators or helping them to be more emotionally intelligent, how fortunate am I that I get to spend a living doing that?
Ah, and I'm so blessed that we are connected too, Chuck.
Yeah.
So you kind of teased it a little bit. You and I connected now a few years ago, and I remember the first time we met, it was in New York City. We had lunch at this cute little French bistro near Columbia University.
Yeah.
And then you and I started talking about, what kind of like courses I could potentially teach the students, right? And I think you and I really, I think, shared a connection between understanding that, we work with a lot of smart students, smart professionals, but it's just that softer side of communications, building connection, influence that I feel, and I get it. Like I wasn't taught these things, but that's missing often, right? And so, actually, long story short, for those who are listening and watching, uh, gosh, when did I come to Columbia? Was it like earlier this year or last? I don't even remember.
You were in the classroom this past spring.
Spring? Was it spring? Was it earlier this year?
Yeah. Well, let's just say, really, earlier this year, good enough.
Yes, earlier this year, I taught my first class. Chuck, you were there watching the entire thing, and gosh, it was just so fun. Like I thought the students were so engaged, and for those who are curious, I was teaching a lot of things from my book, which is the quiet culture versus loud culture, that dynamic, and how I talk about in my book. I was raised in a quiet culture, so you go out, you work. In finance, you work in the corporate environment. Sometimes it can feel difficult. Like, how do you use your voice, right? So I thought it was a fantastic class. Chuck, you were there almost kind of like guiding it in some ways too. So that was awesome.
Well, I will say, Jessica, and I think this is an important distinction that we make in what people choose to do for a profession. Even though I teach in the engineering school, I'm certainly not an engineer, and that's not the point. I was hired to develop a program called Professional Development and
Mhm.
Leadership, which to our listeners, I hope you will take some insight from here. The companies that come through the years to recruit our Columbia engineers said to our dean many years ago, "You're certainly sending us good engineers. However, when it comes to the leadership competencies, the expectations when they come into the company that they want to be promoted, they want to advance in their careers, it often occurs whether they want to or not that they are now expected to lead other engineers. The brilliance of our Columbia students or any student, take any college, does not always correlate to the capacity to lead people. If it may not come naturally and or you haven't been taught. So this program that we developed was in response to the organizations that needed their engineers to what Warren Buffett calls adopt and develop better human skills. So communication, emotional intelligence, collaboration, problem solving, the things that do not appear in the traditional educational model that model values, which we all know and we appreciate that. You go to school, you get a 4.0, you pat yourself on the back. But what we do in this program is we build the bridge into the world that has a different metric for what makes you valuable. And it's not just engineering skills. There are no lack of brilliant engineers.
Yes.
However, if you take the subset of engineers and you say, how many of them are effective communicators? How many display empathy and how they behave? How many are calm under the weight of pressure and expectations? Now we're getting into fractions. What we're trying to do is to expand the base of that and expose our students to these competencies that you did such a wonderful job communicating that I spend my time because no one has ever told them it's that valuable until they get out into the world and they find out, oh my God, who knew?
Who knew? Who knew
Right.
that it's I always reiterate this like, working hard is expected, but being able to communicate, build visibility is equally as important. So, getting to today's topic, Chuck, which is, we called it taking your career to new heights. Everybody who's watching and listening, they know communications is important. I think that's why they follow the work that I do because they know that they want to double down on this skill. So then let me just kind of ask you some tactical questions, Chuck. Like, so for people who, want to be better communicators, they're invested to become better communicators. What are some tips that you tell them? And I'm sure students ask you this all the time too.
Yeah, no question. Just as you mentioned, and I read your book, and I loved your book, and what I loved about your book is in the introduction to that, where you were really underscoring quiet but loud, and you talked about you needed to advocate better for yourself in order to bring your voice, that somebody else was getting promoted. Hey, what about me? And your boss said, well, it would have been, what about you? But Jessica, where the heck were you? Why didn't you raise your hand? Now, that
Mhm.
is a really interesting use case for an example that many people can relate to. But the question is, what do they do about it? In my case, my first book is called A Climb to the Top. Now, I use mountaineering as a metaphor for how to climb careers, but instead of an ice axe and crampons that I would use to climb a mountain, it's many of the rhetorical and communication devices that I had learned over my years as a public speaker. I state that because I was very fortunate in that I was in my communication job without a blueprint or a manual. I was given the confidence to just go figure out how the heck I'm going to get better at it. And this was pre TED Talks. This was no one knew how to do this. The only reference I had was Dale Carnegie's book on public speaking, and it was really good. So in my book, Jessica, the framework for a climb to the top is called the 10 Commandments of Great Communicators. What I did when I wrote the book, I was very conscious that I wanted the book to be two things: a call to action that you too can improve, but nobody's ever taught you how. And then, most important, the toolkit. And I'm going to give you an example based upon your question. What are some of the tips? You and I do something that a lot of professional communicators do, but many who don't do not. And it's chapter 8 of my book, and it's called The Power of the Pause. Now, I'm conscious not on radio silence here, so I want to be clear, but we live in a world. People are talking too fast. They're saying too much, and they're speaking sometimes for too long, which amounts to information overload, which leads to listening fatigue. So think about the implication in a conversation. There's two sides. Somebody is communicating, somebody is trying to listen. What the science tells us that 60% of our workday is spent communicating, yet only 25% of what is communicated is actually understood. So even before we've sat down, hey, how are you? Good morning. We're already at a deficit because we are comprehending less than what is intended. So, the power of the pause in chapter 8 of the 10 chapter book, Jessica, I had no idea just how big that was. I have students from all over the world sending me emails saying, Chuck, you know what I did in a meeting? I paused. I had someone actually tell me in France the power of the pause changed my life because all his life he just kept speaking at a rapid pace because he was told that's what smart people do. And what he found when he started to dial it back based upon the methods that I taught him, and he was a Columbia student in my class, he started to adopt it and to think differently about how he can speak to people and giving the listener time to catch up in a very crowded, dissonant feeling world. So just that tactic, slowing down, not saying, um, uh, you know, I mean, so, especially the word like. Jessica, I don't know what happened in the last 10 years, but I have students that say like every third word. What's for lunch? Well, like, I think like chicken, but like I'm thinking like French fries. What? So, another chapter, using the power of the pause, be conscious of the fact that when people don't know what they want to say, they just blurt out the first verbal crutch that comes to mind. It's either like, so, um, or I mean. Now, that's not a terrible thing if you only say it once. But if in a 10-minute conversation you said any of those verbal crutches 54 times, you are driving the listener to take that circuit breaker of a brain and completely shut it down. They are visibly present, but they are not there. They can't be. They're exhausted. So, second tip, slow it down and recognize we supplant the verbal crutch with the pause. And it feels very awkward because people aren't used to doing that. And then I'm just going to give you one more, and it's called the rule of three. I came, I saw, I conquered. If you eat Rice Krispies, you get a snap, crackle, and a pop. And if you're filming a television show, it's lights, camera, action. Why is the rule of three important? It's a Greek rhetorics technique. They figured out years ago that information that is presented in clusters of three, ABC, 1, 2, 3, XYZ, is better remembered to the mind of the listener than if we were just to communicate an entire string of information.
Mhm.
We, you, me, especially you, you're as a journalist, but the engineers that I teach, they're in very information heavy businesses. So they have an inclination, and I try to get them to resist the impulse to say too much at the same time. Slow it down, come out with three things to build the bridge. We need water, concrete, and sand. Stop talking. Okay. Make sure, read the room. Do they understand? Are they following you? Okay. Pick up on three more. So those are my three techniques to our listeners. Take a
Oh,
deep breath. Right.
I was gonna say, and I see what you did there. You gave me 3 tips, right?
Exactly. Right. I live by that rule.
And it's exactly what I tell folks that I work with as well. When people are putting a presentation together, the challenge is take all that information and choose the 3 main points.
No question.
The 3 main points, and it's actually a really good exercise even before you have that plain white sheet of PowerPoint, before you put pen to paper. It is a very helpful exercise to think about, "I have all this information, but who am I speaking with, and what are the 3 things I want them to remember?" Because just like you said, Chuck, I think sometimes, and, to no fault of anybody, sometimes people are so excited
Sure.
about the information. They just wanna say everything that they know, all the research they've done, all the data and evidence, but it's like kinda like you said, as humans, we only can remember a certain percentage of what somebody else communicates. So you, as a powerful communicator, you have to be able to make that decision. What is the most important thing? What is the thing that I want people to walk away with, right? I think that's incredibly important. And actually, as you were talking about the pause, I was always like wondering, like, why do people have such a hard time pausing? Is it like they forget, or is it because they're nervous?
There's two things. Well, first, let me comment on what you said. We love speakers who are passionate. We appreciate the immense enthusiasm that people bring. But that is not an excuse to dismiss the discipline that comes with our profession. And you don't have to be a professional communicator to be disciplined toward it. I see my students who are incredibly disciplined toward the profession of engineering, and rightfully so. What I ask my students to do, and it's up to all of them to decide what to do with this. If you decide to treat communication with the same rigor and discipline that you do for engineering, you will be running Google one day. And look at Sundar Pichai, and they're all engineers, these guys. But when they communicate, they've had coaches because I know some of them. And guys like us, you think about, to your point, why don't they do it? Why don't they pause? First, no one told them. Two, the feedback that they're getting has not been honest. Great job. You did a wonderful presentation. No, you didn't. I don't think, I think the teachers that teach it, with all due respect, they got too much to do and they're not focused on each particular individual and all the little nuances that can make them better. And then lastly, I will say, there's no manual in high school and college for
Mhm.
this. There's you got math, geometry, trigonometry, biology, blah 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 blah. How much room do we have for all of this stuff? So what happens? They dismiss the communication. It's irrelevant. Yeah, I can talk, so I can communicate. I think what we do at Columbia is raise the consciousness, help them understand, and we say this respectfully. Because you can speak does not mean you can communicate. Because I can walk doesn't mean I can run. If you think about every great athlete in the world, they will tell you there are people just as skilled as me. But what makes me different? The discipline, the rigor, staying calm under the weight of pressure. All great athletes will tell you that.
Mhm.
And it saddens me when I see a collection or a universe of people or students that believe that their intellect is all that matters on the
Mhm.
road to success. When I have come to find out and to conclude in my years of teaching now, we way overestimate the importance of intellect. And I'm not diminishing its importance. I'm simply saying, as a matter of the factors that lead us to be successful, we significantly underestimate the importance of communication skills, temperament, and the
Mm,
capacity to self correct when things are not going well. Because things don't always go well, but nobody tells you what to do when your career is tanking. And sometimes it's not your fault.
yeah.
And those are not things that are taught in the educational model yet. This is what's at stake. Your careers, your family, your life. If you get a B and not an A, what are you going to do? I get students completely freaked out and crying about it. You're crying about the wrong thing. Does it really matter 30 years from now that you got an A minus? They're told that, and I get it. Of course it matters. But it's got to be put into perspective because when you go into your career, you're getting paid. You're not
Mhm,
paying them to get educated. They're paying you to perform. What
mhm.
makes you a good performer? You combine the technical skills with the leadership competencies. LinkedIn says hard skills and soft skills.
You mentioned the word temperament, and I find that actually quite interesting in how that plays a role in our everyday work. What do you mean by temperament? Is it the emotional intelligence that you're talking about? It's being able to walk into work, have that self and social awareness so you understand human? Like, what does that mean? And how does one develop it? And, what are your thoughts?
Well, let's start there. That emotional intelligence is has four different domains. You just mentioned two of them: self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, and managing other people. My point is, what happens in careers is people are thrown into situations to work with people they don't know. We're all
Mhm,
strangers to each other.
mhm,
We don't know each other's temperament. We don't know the things that set you off. We don't know their triggers. What I found throughout the course of my career, and I'll say I worked in a very high pressure career, and I mean that in a good way. To those who were given much, much is expected. So you come into this Wall Street world, you have to be at your best. Well, what happens when you're not? Because you're not every day. What I have found, Jessica, and I think the thing that was most startling to me, I was shocked at people's behaviors. They're coming in and they're operating in a meeting just fine. Somebody says something, it sets off a trigger point. Next thing you know, they're yelling and screaming at people. Now you're beginning to damage your reputation. If you do it once, you're going to get credit for it's a one-off. But if you do it twice, now it's a pattern and you are that person. And people don't want to work with other people that are ill-tempered. So I'm saying emotional intelligence as a foundation for learning how to stay calm when people are pushing your buttons is not something that we learn in school. When we get married, in particular when we're in relationships, you begin to understand the nuance of what sets off your mates, your
mhm.
children, your parents. But we're not conscious of that in the workplace because we're not living with them. So we only have X number of hours a day to work with people whose style we don't quite understand. When it comes to people's careers, they are incredibly self centered. They look at things, and rightfully so, through the lens of their self interest. My point, Jessica, is what happens if they perceive that somebody is threatening them and threatening them in a way that, oh God, you did a terrible job. Oh, I've got to question your credibility. I've seen that all the time. What happens when very smart people, others begin to chip away at their competence or they begin to impugn their integrity? And people do that. People are very weird about anything that they perceive as a threat. They're going to come at other people. So my point is the human beings, we are emotionally laden creatures, much more so than logical.
Mhm,
We are driven by emotions and our behavior reflects that.
mhm.
My point to my students is your job is to build credibility, trust, and respect, something called the CTR factor. And you do that through your behavior, by treating people with respect, and by delivering on your commitments. Those three things. That is not a terribly difficult thing to understand, but in the weight of every day's work life and
Mhm.
pressure and great expectations, people do not behave accordingly and they don't know how to self correct.
One really interesting thought is, I think about a lot of our listeners, the people who love, the show that we put on. And I feel like a lot of the people who listen are, they understand like what I mean when I say this. So it's like people, and this is, I think back to myself, honestly. I try to treat everybody with respect, right? When it comes to work, right?
Yeah.
I find myself like my demeanor is I'm actually a pretty calm person, right? But sometimes that can be misconstrued as people can walk over you. People can talk over you, right?
Yeah.
Because you are so nice, you are so calm, right? You're not assertive or loud, right? So the people that you're talking about, Chuck, these are the people who probably need to work a little bit more on their like self-awareness a little bit. But now I want to flip it. What if you are like the person who you are nice, you are calm, you are quiet, right?
Mhm.
And then you have somebody who's taking advantage of you. What
Mm.
do you do in a situation like that?
Well, you're talking about different things. You're talking about there is temperament, which to you, you're calm. I am a calm individual. It takes a lot to push my buttons, but when they're pushed, you're going to know it. People don't know how to get themselves out of that. And I'll say that in a couple different ways. I have students that we have what psychologists calls the disease to please. When they walk into that room, all they want to do is make everybody happy. They want to make sure that everybody's okay. Look at me, look at what I've done. Okay, that's an extreme case, but it works against them. They try they're almost too giving in their way, and when people see that, they seize on it. There is a wonderful book written by the Wharton professor named Adam Grant called Give and Take. And Give and Take's premise is that there are three kinds of people in the world: givers, takers, and matchers. That the most successful people in the world are the givers, and the least successful people in the world are givers. And there's a very big gap between that. The least successful on the end of that bell curve, they give too much, they get pushed over. They're so conscious about making everybody happy and pleasing everybody that they are diminishing their own capacity and getting walked over. There are the takers. We all know who they are. You just know who shows up and doesn't give you back what you give them. And then there are the matchers. You give them one, they give you one. The reason I'm putting this into context is for you, the description that you've made. There are many people that don't quite understand because they lack the self awareness to self examine themselves. Oh my God, I do that. I am shocked at the number of people that I have coached that are not aware of what they do, how they do it, or how to get out of it. Even those that are aware of it, they don't have a blueprint to fix it, so to speak.
Mhm.
Just if I could reinvent the educational model, I would make this a massive component of teaching our children how to self correct, how not to be a pushover. So, your question is a difficult thing to respond to in 30 seconds. But what I can say, if you are listening and you are resonating with this message, and this could be you, I encourage you, go find a book. There are no lack of books on emotional intelligence. I use for my students a book called EQ 2.0 by Travis Bradberry. There is an assessment at the back of the book where you can score and weight the four domains of EQ. I would start there. There is no pill you can take, and there's no quick fix. This is like learning how to run a marathon. You start with a mile, then you get to 3, then you get to 6, and if you're lucky and you don't get injured, you'll run your marathon. Emotional intelligence is a lifelong pursuit of learning, one, to modify and change the behaviors that you described if you are motivated to change them, because there's one design flaw. You actually have to try to change. And I know many people, despite their own misgivings, they are too lazy to change. And I say that with all due respect. People
Yeah.
come to me, look, why didn't I change? Because you didn't do enough to help yourself. You just, status quo is really simple to maintain. Change is hard and it feels
Mhm.
threatening, so people don't do it.
Mm. I'm pretty optimistic about a lot of our viewers and listeners that the fact that they are listening to this, I do think that they are encouraged to change. You know, it's interesting because I just had this conversation with my best friend recently because my best friend is truly what I just mentioned. She is a nice person. So nice, so calm, so giving that she was telling me the other day that she was having conflict with one of her coworkers and this coworker, if you can imagine it, would just cut her off every time she's talking, dismiss the things that my friend would say, right? And because my friend was so nice and she wants to be nice, she kind of just like lets it happen, right? And I was like telling her, I was like, you know, there's a difference between nice, but also being able to create boundaries too. Like creating boundaries, standing your ground that if she's talking over you, dismissing you, you have to be able to stand up and defend yourself. And that's not you being not nice. It's some ways like self-respect in many ways too. That's kind of how I see it.
Well, I'm puzzled that we equate one with the other. Because you show a backbone that works against being nice?
Right.
I appreciate it, and to your friend, I feel his pain, whoever that may be, but they're thinking about it wrong.
Yeah. Yep.
You can be, and I like to consider myself one. I'm very nice. I'm generous with my time,
Mhm.
but don't for a minute think you're going to push me over. And I will very respectfully, because I know how, because I'm trained in
Mhm.
emotional intelligence. I will not scream at somebody. I won't
Mhm.
punch them. I will not do anything violent. I won't do anything to hurt them. But I will take a very deep breath, and instead of inciting the trigger moment, for anybody who is watching, I go into a completely different mode when this happens. So imagine this is your friend who's being pushed. Our natural inclination at the push is to push back. That's what happens in inertia. We can't, that's a human instinct. Our human instinct is to survive. That's the most thing we
Mhm.
all have in common. We have to figure out how not to be pushed, not to be
Mhm.
killed, not to die. What I do and what I've learned, and it's a wonderful book called Triggers by the
Mhm.
coach Marshall Goldsmith, which is really I look at him as my even though I've never met him, I love his books. It's when these points occur. So to your friend who is not showing the backbone, it's one being honest and telling somebody, and it's a very difficult thing to do because it's working against your nice model.
Mhm.
I don't appreciate what you're saying to me. I don't like how you're saying it. So right now, and what I do, and anybody who's watching, watch what I do with my hands. I take my hands, I stop talking, I put them to the prayer position. Notice what happens in the body language. This is a very peaceful place. I'm not here with my dukes up. Look at the power of what the hands are capable of non-verbally. I can do this, or I can go to here. Notice when we shake hands, it's a trust indicator. We trust hands to ensure that there's nothing up our sleeves
Mhm.
to kill you. It,
Oh,
okay,
no. Yeah.
we back.
Or you're back.
Yeah, okay. The mic is a little sensitive, but what I'm saying, Jessica, these are not tips and tools that we are taught. Now, this is what I teach in my emotional intelligence class. Calm down is you first calm the mind when this is happening. Put your hands together and take a step back and try to remove yourself from the person who's coming at you trying to take advantage of you. They're
Mhm.
immediately going to see that there is a response that is contrary to what they expect, and it usually unnerves them. That's a good thing. We want them to understand that what you're saying to me is not acceptable. But if
Mhm.
we yell and scream back, nobody's heard. Now we're talking over each other. We
Mhm.
don't want to talk over each other. We
Yeah.
want to send the signals, both non-verbally, in my case, which is why I start with the hands.
Mhm.
Stop talking, count yourself to 3. Now, this is in the military called a combat breath. When all hell is breaking loose
Mhm.
and you have to get your wits about you and bullets are flying all over the place, you are no good to your mates if you just start
Yeah.
shooting because you'll probably shoot your friends.
Yeah.
So what is the combat breath? It's taking a couple of seconds to gain your composure. Now, in my book, my second book is called The Moment That Defines Your Life. My TED Talk is on September 26th in Luxembourg City, and I'm going to be talking about that, about the importance of the breath in moments of stress and anxiety and how we use that breath. Now, in my case, I use a technique called stop talking, start counting. So it's usually count to 3.
Mhm.
If that person's still coming at me and I'm not going to let him push over, but I'm not going to be a jerk in my response. So I slow it all down. I count to 3. I wait. I create the space of silence between me and that suitor because now it's a fight, sadly. So I'm just now brushing here on a couple techniques that I hope I can give the audience a little bit of inspiration and let your curiosity drive you that there are, in fact, techniques, but they may seem counterintuitive. We
Mhm.
think that every time somebody talks to us, we have to talk back. I teach my students, and I think the reason I'm partly effective is because I'm delivering the unexpected. I'm
Mhm.
not telling them what everyone else is telling them. Oh, if you just stand up to them and tell them, that doesn't work. Not to bullies. I was bullied as a kid. I know what it's like to be bullied. We take a different approach. We use our mind as the
Mhm.
tool to recognize there are tactics in communication that allow us to get out of this thing. Hopefully, nobody gets hurt. But I want everyone to who is nice. We love nice people. I will not hang out with somebody who is not. But nice does not give anybody permission to push you around. And while your point, Jessica, it is a matter of self-respect, I agree. I don't think people look at it that way. I think they're too afraid of the consequence if somebody accuses them of not being a nice person. We need to redefine nice. We need to
Mhm.
we need to rethink how we show up in our human interactions and communicate to people by our words and our actions what we are not willing to tolerate. And when that happens, if you don't have the energy or the will to fight, just walk away. Do not let disrespectful people treat you in any manner that is not professional and that does not befit a decent and kind human being. I just say it's the fight, freeze, or flight response in emotional intelligence. I've had no lack of things, Jessica, where I've just walked away. I said, I'm not going to listen to you. Maybe on another day, but today is not our day. And I try to kill them with kindness. I'm not a religious person, so I don't say God bless you, or may God bless you. But I have friends that do. You know what? May God bless you, and then they walk away. It takes all the sting out of that air.
Right. And to your point of like, you shared a lot of great techniques on like how do you initially react in a situation like that. And I think like the everything that you said about taking that pause, taking that breath, it almost is a way for you to remind yourself to almost like, it's a moment of like, how do I want to respond in a situation like this? Right. It's
Well,
a moment for you to ask.
that's what that silence does. When you're in the
Yeah.
combat breath, the 1, 2, 3, what you're actually doing is it feels awkward because people don't like the silence. You're now contemplating your response. Most people, the arguments come, and we're all guilty of that. We don't take the time, we trigger, bam, we respond, and somebody gets into trouble. What if every time we spoke to each other, we counted to 3? The world would be a much more peaceful place. But that's not promoted. We're all in a hurry. Everything
Yeah.
is fast. Well, what if we slowed it all down? And that's
Yeah.
what I try to be an arbiter of. Slow it down, be conscious, think about your word choices. They matter. Think
Mhm.
about your body language. That's what people remember.
Mhm.
They don't remember every word you say. In New York, especially, we speak at a rate of about 125 words a minute. There's no way anybody could remember all of that.
Mhm.
So the mind of the listener creates the narratives.
Mhm.
What did I hear? What did I think I hear? And then they begin to paraphrase and then they conclude. And 25% of the time they get it wrong anyway. It's so wonder we even get through a day screwing something up because the math is against us. So it means we have to work harder in order
Yeah.
to be understood. We seek first to understand, then to be understood.
It's so funny. I love how we kinda, like, pivoted to this because I think it has something that's been on my mind after I had that conversation with her because I do agree, like, being nice doesn't mean you allow people to just talk over you. I think it's being able to, in some ways, stand your ground, and that breath that you just talked about is that moment, a choice that you get to make. How do I wanna handle a situation like that?
Indeed.
Um, okay, so we've been chatting all things
I know.
communications, career, handling difficult conversations. So, as we wrap up here, is there any kind of like last golden nugget wisdom that you'd love to share with our viewers and people who are watching and listening?
I, I, I I am going to conclude this the way that I begin my Columbia classes with incredibly brilliant, ambitious people who have come from all over the world to try to live their dream. And when I walk into that classroom, Jessica, you didn't see me teaching that, but this is what I do. I close the door. Now, first, I start for about 3 minutes nonverbally. I begin to communicate with my hands, my eyes, and my mouth. And I'm now got an entire student body communicating nonverbally. But I'm making a point here. And my insight to all of you is an encouragement on 3 things. Number one, don't ever be afraid to make a mistake, but be afraid of not learning from them. And the reason I say that, I see many students and many people I coach, they're so afraid of getting something wrong. And I think there's a lot of judgment in that. Oh my God, I'm not smart enough. I'm not this. I don't know. I encourage you, don't let other people, don't fall prey to the people that make you feel stupid. They can't make you feel stupid without your consent. So recognize if you make a mistake, just fix it. Number two, under promise and over deliver to your employers, to your husband, to your wife, to your children. I'm around people that make an incredible amount of claims. I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing. And they may, But in our careers, if you don't align your actions and your words and live up to the expectations and deliver on your commitments, you're not going to go very far. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care where you went to school. You could be a Harvard 4.0, and if you fail to live up to your commitments, you're no good to me. I would never work with someone that could do that. And I think the last thing that I could say is anything we can do, this is me, you, and everyone, to improve or let me back up and put it another way. Be present in every human interaction. Drop your phone when you meet somebody. Whatever the heck is happening in your phone is not as important as the person that you're meeting for coffee. And I say that because sometimes people meet me. I swear they're somewhere else. And I recognize we all have problems, whatever it is, then don't meet me. But when you come distracted and you're meeting with someone, you're diminishing the capacity of that interaction. And it seems like such a simple thing, but we have got it wrong. We're so busy and so under pressure. And I'm working 24/7 and 180 hours a week. And you have no idea how I hear that all the time. Okay, well, right now, here and now, we are getting together. Drop your phone, look me in the eye, and tell me how you're doing. Take a deep breath. We are operating in an environment now of anxiety and stress that I've never seen before.
Yeah.
And I'm not blaming the phones, I'm blaming ourselves. We can, at any given moment, decide to put down the devices and talk the old fashioned way when we get together with our friends. And as simple as that sounds, it's not easy because it's not the operating mode of the world we live in. Well, it's my operating mode. And I try to live by example, not to say that I'm perfect or it's only about the way that I operate, but I've seen the difference in people between those who are able to just stay calm and recognize living in the present and being present with your friends, and those that are physically present and mentally absent. How's that?
Words of wisdom, whether we are just starting in our career, we've been working for years. It's just a great way just to be a good person, a good
Yeah.
human, connecting with other people.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well put.
Chuck, this was so fun. I've been looking forward to this conversation
Hey,
for months now. And I'm like, Chuck, we got to do this. Like, we got to have a conversation, and I feel very special to be able to teach at Columbia with you. So thank you so
it's a
much for
pleasure.
having
No,
me.
welcome aboard. It's great to have you. Oh, well, you always have an open door. Put it that way.
I appreciate that. So, for folks who have loved this episode and they're like, how do I get connected with you, Chuck? Where do they find you?
I appreciate that. Well, two different ways. One, if you remember my name, Chuck Garcia, and you remember .com, you got me. So if you go to chuckgarcia.com, you find me. There's a contact tab. And just hit the contact. Tell me you were on Jessica's show. I will respond to you as quickly as I can. Second, I'm not huge on social media. I do and am active enough on LinkedIn. You can always go to LinkedIn, type in Chuck Garcia. You'll see me. Hit me with a connection request. I will certainly hit you back, put a little context if I can help you. And then lastly, if you want to email me the old fashioned way, my email is chuck at, and I'll tell you the name of my company. My name of my company is Climb Leadership. It's in Climb a Mountain. So chuck at climbleadership.com. If that is a mouthful, just go to LinkedIn and go to my website. That's good enough.
3 different ways to get in contact with you. There's no shortage
Everything
of
in
it.
three.
Exactly. The power of the 3.
Indeed. The rule of three. I use it every day.
I love it. All right. Well, again, thank you so much, Chuck, for being here. And for
Thank you
everybody
for
who's been
having me.
listening, yes, everybody who's been listening, who's been watching, I hope you have found this episode, very enlightening, very motivational, and of course, walked away with some tangible things on how you can take your career to new heights. So, with that, thank you, Chuck, and thank you
Thank
all
you,
so much
Jessica.
for
It was a
listening.
real pleasure. Thank you so much.